Welcome. We will now begin the U.S. Copyright Office's latest public modernization webinar. During the program, attendees may submit questions using the Q&A panel accessed by clicking the Q&A icon at the bottom of the Zoom screen. We will answer questions after the presentations are complete. However, we may not answer all of the submitted questions during the webinar. This session is being recorded. If you choose to participate, any of your questions will be included in the recording as part of the record. Please welcome Sarah Garski, Deputy Director of the Copyright Modernization Office.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar on our implementation of the Scaled Agile Framework, aka SAFE, in support of enterprise copyright system development activities. I am delighted that you have taken the time to join us today. Before I introduce our primary speaker, who will help us deep dive into SAFE, I'll spend just a moment to provide some relevant background. The Enterprise Copyright System, the ECS for short, is envisioned as the new enterprise IT system that will integrate and improve all of the office's technology systems. The ECS is envisioned to incorporate our registration, recordation, public record, and licensing IT applications, among other functions. Under the umbrella of the ECS, these applications will be tied together with a consistent look and feel, and by leveraging central sets of capabilities and shared services. This will make the ECS easier to navigate, user-centered, flexible, and streamlined. This is a massive undertaking with many moving parts and a high degree of complexity. In order to provide guardrails around this massive undertaking, in January of 2021, we officially kicked off our use of SAFE. SAFE is both a framework and a methodology, and we are using it to help us coordinate all of the moving parts of the ECS and execute this massive development effort in a holistic manner. We have already seen significant benefits during the brief period of time that we have been using SAFE. It has helped us understand just how interconnected our services across the office are, highlighted the breadth and depth of the technical components that comprise the solution, and has aided us in defining meaningful ways to coordinate and build our solution. The increased and improved collaboration between teams has been particularly gratifying for many of us in this time of remote work. Bob Shirley is the product owner for the library's Lean Agile Center of Excellence with the Office of the Chief Information Officer. Bob is going to share more with you about SAFE and how it is helping us to develop the ECS. Mike Nybeck, Software Engineering Manager, also from the Office of the Chief Information Officer, will join Bob and I during the live Q&A portion of this webinar. They are both fantastic to work with, and I am delighted to have them both with us today. Take it away, Bob.
Thanks, Sarah. Hi, everyone. So I'm going to walk us through today through some background on what Scaled Agile Framework is, SAFE for short, why we need SAFE, and some of the key features. I'm also going to sprinkle in some details about our implementation along the way. Since we don't have all day, I won't be going into a tremendous amount of detail, but if you have any burning questions that I don't cover, make sure you take the time at the end. We'll have time at the end to address them. Also, I want to give a caveat right up the front that I want to apologize ahead of time if I drop a lot of acronyms on you today. But don't worry, there's not a test at the end, so you can feel safe that in that at least. So before we get into the definition of what the Scaled Agile Framework is, I'd like to take a few minutes to share some of the background on where we started. So to give you some context on why we approached SAFE in the first place. So at the start of 2020, we had two teams engaged in building the enterprise copyright system. the recordation system, which was just getting ready to launch a limited pilot, and the public record system, which was about 6 months into its development. But during the year, we started 2 additional work streams: registration and platform services. Platform services, which I'll talk about a little bit more in depth as part of our architectural runway. The cross-team communication was limited and unplanned at that point. Collaboration was sporadic and ad hoc. The teams were basically working in silos. And that was fine because they were independent of each other at that time. In addition, we had been doing some planning at the ECS level, but there was little in the way of formal structure to that planning. And it was mostly within pockets and not across the entire ECS. So we saw a need to break these bring the work streams closer together, especially as we brought more on, and build a way to foster collaboration and communication, because much of the code being developed underneath these systems was reusable. And there were emerging needs that required some of our teams to rely on others. So we weren't only leveraging the same look and feel across the teams on the interface, we were also building shared components to deliver key functionalities, services like authentication and payments that required a deeper level of coordination for us to successfully implement. So all of these teams were already working together or working in an Agile methodology called Scrum, where the software is being developed in short, like 3 weeks iterations called sprints. Each team is led by a copyright representative called a product owner, and they get Agile guidance from a team member called the Scrum Master. And we didn't want to mess any of that up. It was already working pretty good. And so whatever framework we adopted, we wanted to accommodate the continuation of this. So summarizing, at that point, we were looking for a way to scale our current Agile development processes so that it could solve all of our problems. So there are a lot of frameworks out there in the world that help, that describe ways and provide tools to scale up this type of development. And they even help address the collaboration and communication issues I mentioned before. And I'm not going to go through all of those right now, but after looking at many of them on our own, we decided that the Scale Agile framework, also known as SAFe, made the most sense for us. So let me jump into a definition of what SAFe is. We can start with this book definition on the slide, which says SAFe is a framework for applying Agile methodology, which advocates business-driven priorities, early delivery, continual improvement, and flexible responses to change at an organization-wide level to holistically manage development. Now, the key words to pull from that is applying Agile at an organization-wide level. You can also describe it as a combination of principles, values, and practices that support Agile software development across multiple teams. It fosters collaboration, coordination, helps multiple development teams working on the same large enterprise solution deliver value more efficiently and predictably. In general, though, the Scaled Agile framework is a structure for helping us make sure we're adding real value to our customers in a way that is efficient and sustainable. You'll find, we'll describe a little in a moment here, there's a top-down planning aspect. There are also tools and practices that help us communicate and collaborate. And there are principles to guide us towards greater efficiency. So if I shift my focus a little bit, and I'll tell you that at this point, we were in the early stages of our implementation of SAFe. We were in the storming and forming stage, if you will. And after spending some time early on learning about SAFe and getting guidance from experts on the topic, we took the important step of establishing what we call the Lean Agile Center of Excellence, or LACE, which in SAFe is a group that leads and provides guidance to the participants on execution of the framework. This group began working with copyright leadership, product managers and leadership to capture key aspects of our work in ECS and help start the process of aligning everyone toward our common goals. SAFE introduced us to a structure that we use to guide the definition of a formal vision for ECS and its underlying components. Using the tools provided by the framework, our business stakeholders, led by the project managers, helped to develop these definitions that include a description, an explanation of scope for the product being developed, and a definition of done, providing a big picture for the teams to coalesce around. So the work here has been very helpful in forming a common understanding of what we're building. Our portfolio epic, which is shown is represented by that block on the left, includes the vision for the entire enterprise copyright system. It's the whole who, what, why of the system, of what the system includes, as well as what the priority is to the organization, and a very rough estimate of how big the effort is from the business perspective. The portfolio epic is an extra large in case you're interested. Similarly, we went through each work stream, the registration, recordation, public record, licensing, and we created business epics for those that describe what they are, defined what's in scope, and of note, more importantly, or just as equally important, we also captured what is not in scope with each of these definitions. So we made, and so finally, sticking off to the right there, the architectural runway. Let's talk about that. So the architectural runway epic represents all of the work of developing and implementing underlying technology that supports the system. That includes infrastructure, core services, and the like. It consists of the code, the shared components, the services, the technical infrastructure, all the stuff that's needed to implement near-term features. And this work is primarily done in the work stream we call platform services. But that work stream doesn't only work on just the software. It also includes, comprises the work that we're doing to design the modern accessible user interfaces. So all of our UX, user-centered design activities fall into this architectural runway or enablement epic as well. So underlying each one of these epics, defined, we have a little bit more detail on the right there, are features. So the next level down from this epic level is features. And after defining each epic, we start capturing and prioritizing those features. Each of the business epics, of course, are made up of features. Features make up a piece of functionality in the software that fulfills a specific customer need. Think of it as like Word, in a Word being an epic, right? And then the print functionality or the spell check functionality is a feature. And so similarly, for each one of our work streams, we do the same thing. We define those features that we need to implement that epic. And in turn, each of these features include user stories that represent the documented requirements in Agile development world that are implemented by the teams during their sprints to provide value to our customers. So think of it as, if you go back to the analogy of spell check, the ability to hit that button to initiate spell check in Word is a user story, probably to some way. So in the next process step of our implementation, after creating these epic definitions, we begin defining those features that are needed by the copyright for each of the work streams, honing in on which ones we should target for development over the next few months. These features are captured in something we call the program backlog. And it helps our product managers more effectively plan and prioritizing. The product backlog, basically think of that as a holding area for upcoming features, which are intended to address user needs and deliver business benefits. We use this program backlog as input into our planning exercise, which I'll explore in a moment. So let's move to the next slide, and we'll talk about why SAFE. So starting off, I'll say that SAFE includes 10 principles that advocate for early delivery, collaboration, continual improvement, and flexible response to change. It defines processes and practices that facilitate organization-wide holistic management of large-scale application development efforts. And it includes the core values of transparency, alignment of purpose, built-in quality, and program execution. I mentioned all of this to underscore that the framework has a depth and breadth we can leverage to not only support us in our initial implementation, but provide guidance as we mature. Like I mentioned before, the framework allows us to continue developing the system at the team level using our normal Agile processes that we're very familiar with, while also helping guide us in this planning. And it provides tools and techniques to improve our cross-team coordination. This is very powerful, and this is what we really wanted SAFE to bring to us. We also look at the fact that there are a lot of risk involved in developing large enterprise size systems like ECS. And the framework provides repeatable processes, practices, and other things that help us mitigate some of those risks. And finally, well, not finally, we get to demonstrate working software iteratively. Now, we do that on a sprint level at the team level, but this is beyond that. Not just at the team level, but a consolidated demo at the ECS level is something that we've never done before. And it is part of the Agile SAFE way to bring all the teams together to do big, large room demonstrations of the capabilities that we're developing. It's part of the inspect and adapt that I'll talk about a little bit. And so now I can say, finally, SAFE gives us better reporting at the program level. But to be honest, even though we're only like a little over 6 months into our implementation, we're still working out how best to incorporate the metrics that we're tracking. It's a work in progress, and we definitely see value in measuring our performance in a way that SAFE advocates. But it's an area that we continue to mature on, and we hope to, as time goes on, incorporate more of those metrics into our day-to-day so we can use those to increase our performance going forward. So that's some of the reasons we found SAFE to be useful to us. I'm sure there are others. There's a lot of others. But for the sake of the time, I'll move on to our next slide. As we work on our SAFE implementation throughout the fall, we documented our epics, we defined and prioritized our features, and we started up cross-team meetings with our product owners, scrum masters, tech leads, all of that to help us facilitate communication and coordination. We synchronized the sprint schedules and cadence across all development work streams, and we started organizing our work in ways that increased efficiency. For instance, by splitting out our shared services and coordinating implementation with each team in that platform services area, we were able to get better understanding for the breadth and depth of what was needed by each team, and thus we were able to schedule the work more effectively. So we're approaching, at that point, our first quarterly planning meeting in January. We began defining what we would work on over the next 4 months, pulling from that program backlog that I mentioned before. Each work stream pulling from that program backlog builds a feature backlog and then starts stubbing user stories off those features that we've prioritized. So as you can see, we're starting to begin the nascence of a repeatable process for us to follow. And let me be honest here. At this point in the implementation process, we were all a little stressed out, wondering if it was really worth all the effort. But everyone involved, both copyright and OCIO, are great to work with. And there's a level of trust across the teams that I think provided the inertia to keep us moving forward. So if we move to the next slide, I'll talk more about the features in the planning process. In our SAFE implementation, we have defined 4 time-boxed program increments per year. Each program increment is organized into a 12-week period of development, which includes 4 development sprints of 3 weeks each. All the work streams we mentioned before participate in the program increment: recordation, registration, licensing, public record, and platform services. We call the program increment PI for short, by the way. At the end of each PI, all the teams get together for a large room. At the beginning, we all get together in a large room planning session where we finalize the features we will develop over the next 12 weeks, and we commit to objectives for those features. We take the time during the session to understand business needs, crosswalk dependencies, mitigate risk, thoroughly plan out all of the work for each work stream, all the way down to the user story level. And when I say crosswalk dependencies, I mean that we actually sit down with other teams that we need something from and work out the timing so that everyone is executing smoothly, on paper at least. This level of dependency management is crucial to us and a cornerstone of the planning sessions. I just can't underestimate or understate the value of that part of the process. Something we were definitely missing before. So at the end of our 2-day planning session, so this lasts 2 whole days, at the end of that, we present our plans to each other and we adjourn. We immediately launch into development for 12 weeks. Constantly monitoring dependencies, talking with each other and coordinating. The teams are working in their normal Agile processes during this whole time. We're still cross-talking, we're coordinating on a weekly basis with Scrum Masters, product owners, and tech leads throughout the entire 12 weeks. We had our first planning session in mid-January. And it was a little rough. Timing being what it was coming out of the holiday season, we were all a little rushed. Also, not knowing what to expect if we missed anything. But we leaned into it. We leaned on each other and we made it through. Afterward, we actually sat down and documented some of the things we thought we needed to change. And then we just turned and moved forward in a true Agile fashion. So we did the 12 weeks. At the end of the 12-week program increment, all the teams come back together to review progress in a ceremony we call the Inspect and Adapt. Each team takes time to demo what they've accomplished over the increment. And to me, this is the coolest part. We get to demonstrate the value we're building directly to our internal stakeholders on a regular interval, giving them a chance to see the tangible benefits of our developments and for the development teams to gather valuable feedback. And this is happening at the ECS level, not the team level. So everybody, including each team, is getting to see what other teams are doing too. We also take the time to reflect back over what we just did over that time period, the 12-week time period of the PI, and we capture feedback on what went well and what improvements are needed, allowing us to adapt and improve our performance over time. Now, these are pieces that are definitely Agile. This is like what we do at the team level on a 3-week basis, but now we're doing it at the ECS level on a 12-week basis. So we've effectively scaled this process up. Now, we just recently completed our first Inspect and Adapt, and I think it was truly outstanding. It just shows that the work that the teams are doing is great, some of which is already in production. Seeing it demonstrated to our internal stakeholders is kind of a proud moment for some of us, because it starts to feel like ECS instead of just registration, recordation, public records, licensing, et cetera. We're starting to really feel like and coalesce around that ECS vision. And soon enough, we'll all be seeing, the public will be seeing the fruits of this labor. Now, to sum all this up, let me say that I think SAFE is providing the benefit we hoped it would at the beginning. We still have a ways to go. Some of that has to do with our maturity, and some of it has to do with making SAFE fit our way of doing things. But regardless of how we get there, we're developing a repeatable process that's helping us deal with the issues I mentioned at the offset. So if you think about it, at this point, we've gone through our second PI planning event. It just happened a couple of weeks back. It's much better than the first. The teams are actively working now in their sprints again, developing away on their user stories. And in about 10 weeks, we'll get together and do it all over again. I think I speak for most of us when I say the Scaled Agile framework has started to show real value, and we're committed to seeing us through. But it's definitely been an interesting road to implementation, and I look forward to continuing that and developing more maturity across all of ECS in our processes so that we can create even more value for our customers. So that's all I have. I think now I can send it back to Sarah to wrap it up.
Okay, thank you, Bob. I do recognize that Bob shared a good amount of technical information in his presentation. I want to suggest that a key takeaway, practical takeaway, is that this framework allows us, the business, in collaboration with our partner in the Office of the Chief Information Officer. This is a framework that allows us to be more responsive, focused, top-down, and promote relentless improvement, all of which will help us to deliver the ECS in a more effective and efficient manner. We are also able to ensure that you, the users of our services, are embedded into the development process through your feedback, which is key to our decision making and helps us determine how to prioritize what we are going to work on. One of the SAFE-related cadence ceremonies that Bob mentioned a couple of times is this thing called a program increment. And so this is a period of time when we're doing our work, and there's this planning activity that precedes that. And there's a lot of activity that leads up to that, and your input on, say, on pilots that we've already made available, your feedback on those kinds of things helps to inform our planning. We really want to address the key needs and make our services more intuitive and easier to access. As we progress along this development path, and I think Bob hinted at this, we've got some built-in learning opportunities. Bob mentioned the Inspected Adapt event. It gives us a chance, these things give us a chance to pause and do a little catching of our breath, do some innovating, think outside the box, and continually recalibrate so that we are really working at our peak efficiency to the extent that we can all the time. This safe structure and methodology is going to help us get where you want us to be, which is an integrated IT system that ties all of the copyright services together in a scalable, clear, and user-friendly way. I want to thank you again for joining us, and I believe we are now ready for questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Sarah. Before we start the Q&A portion of the program, we would like to conduct a short poll. Please let us know, including today's webinar, how many Copyright Office modernization webinars have you watched or attended? 1, 2 to 4, 5 to 7, 8 to 11, or all 12. We will now begin the question and answer portion of the program. Attendees can submit questions using the Q&A panel, accessed by clicking the Q&A icon at the bottom of the Zoom screen. First question for our panelists. How do you determine or prioritize what to work on during a program increment?
So I'll take that. A lot of thought goes into what we prioritize and the order in which we work on features that will make up the ECS. We strive to always work on the most important thing at any one time. But as I mentioned just a moment ago, we definitely take into account user feedback. What features and capabilities have we heard our service users asking for? And what features are our users expressing the most interest in? In addition, we carefully consider the sequencing of feature development based on dependencies and interrelationships between components, between the ECS components. I will say one of the real benefits of this structured approach to this massive project is the opportunities that it has provided for collaboration across all of the components. This has helped us, or this has provided us with a lot greater visibility into some of the dependencies and interrelationships. Thanks.
Thank you, Sarah. Next question. Will there be some kind of tracking system where everyone can see the status of the different parts or action items of a project to make it easier to see the status of the dependent parts as you move towards your deadlines?
So we have internal, I mean, thus far, you know, we're still getting our legs under us, our safe legs. And Bob mentioned this earlier, we're still working through some of the tracking and reporting that we're doing, but I certainly hear that, you know, that there might be a desire for some additional information being made more visible outside of the office. And so we'll take that feedback and see what we can do.
Thank you, Sarah. Next question is for Bob. Can you share a real example of the SAFE framework helping the recordation, registration, public records, and enablement teams to resolve an issue or stay coordinated on a feature?
Sure, I'll give you one that's come up recently. Actually, the ECS, the Enterprise Copyright System team members within as we approached our last product planning session, had brought up the fact that we wanted to integrate in an additional product line or tool into our login process. And this process has already been established and is already in production on our recordation pilot. And in order for us to make the changes that were being proposed, we have to make significant changes to the underlying service, which would in effect also affect our recordation project, our team and software. So what we have to do is we have to coordinate. So Platform Services is implementing the change to the login process, but the public record and recordation have to make changes on their side to accommodate for it. And because of the timing of the teams and their proximity to going into production with these changes, we have a very delicate dance that we have to do with that change. This is something that under normal circumstances, without SAFE and the mechanisms we have in place, would have been very ad hoc, may not have worked well, we might have missed something. But in this case, we can communicate about it. We identify it right off the bat. We raise a red flag. We communicate it and start collaborating on how we can solve this problem in the least disruptive way possible. Then we build a plan, and through the program increments, we will develop that plan and then implement it. And so all the mechanisms are in place for us to manage those types of changes as they come across our plate. And I think that's a great example of how it's already starting to help us internally.
Thank you, Bob. Next question. You mentioned you had just started the second program, Increment. What lessons have you learned so far, and what benefits have you seen?
So I'll take that. So I'll tell you this. One of the first things we learned going into the planning, it normally is, in the book, they always talk about everybody being in the room together. And there's value in that. Being able to rush over to a table and talk to somebody and ask a question is very valuable. So we all, everybody's supposed to get into a room. Of course, because of the pandemic, we all have to do this virtually, which makes logistics incredibly hard. We didn't do such a good job during the first PI, to be honest, on those logistics. And so we had to figure out a way to mirror the fluidity of in-person cross-team collaboration and conversations. That was not easy. And I commend everybody that was participating in this process for being adaptable and kind of trusting in the technology. We had to transform things like the program board, which is normally this tactile wall of artifacts, basically Post-it notes up on the wall with string stretching from one to another to show the dependencies. We had to recreate that whole thing virtually in the tools that we had available. And so that was definitely a challenge and something we had to learn from. But we came out of that on the other end with some new skills and new capabilities that I think are adding a lot of value to us as we move forward. Also, we've also seen benefits with the collaboration and communication, like I just mentioned, with the teams getting together and solving problems that pop up, and then being able to use the tools and the processes in SAFE to execute on those problems. It's just helping us, coordinate so much better and faster. And I think as we get more mature about that, it'll be even better.
Thank you, Bob. Next question. How long is a program increment?
I'll answer that one. I mentioned before in the presentation that program increments are 12 weeks in length, and they're basically, they start with the PI planning and they end with the inspect and adapt. And in that 12 weeks, we're breaking it up into the sprints. We have 4 3-week sprints in there. And during that time frame, the teams are really focused on the work that they've committed to. So they commit to it during the program increment, they work on it during the 12-week program increment, and then they come out on the other end and they show off what they just did. And at the near end of that, right as we start to come out of that last sprint, that last iteration, that last 3-week iteration, we start to look at the next body of work, the next 12 weeks, and we start to plan for that. And in some of that planning, we actually do research and development. So the program increment, while it's 12 weeks in length, we're focused heavily on the development of new features and capabilities. We also take time near the end of that to innovate. And innovation means we look for new tools, new technologies that we can incorporate into the system to make it even better for our customers. We do research, we do technical feasibilities, we do all kinds of little actions that will help us. It won't help us immediately. It might help us 6 months or 12 months down the road, but we do these little research projects to help us move in a direction that's going to provide even more value to the customers at the end of the day. And so I know I went off topic a little bit there, but the program increment is such, it's a packed full of all kinds of great stuff. And then at 12 weeks, we do a tremendous amount of laying the groundwork for ECS.
Thank you, Bob. Next question. Where can we see what you're working on now?
So I will take that. That is a great question. So the go-to place where you can keep up with what we are doing is copyright.gov, the copyright.gov website, excuse me. You will want to click on the modernization tab once you are on the copyright.gov website. That is on the right side of the page. From there, you will see a quarterly quick facts document that will give you some insight into what we are currently working on and what we are planning. And you will also find our recorded webinars, descriptions of the various ECS components that we talked about that comprise the ECS today, that we talked about today, and some information about some of the non-IT related activities that the office is working on in support of modernization. I do want to go back to one of the previous questions and provide a little more my own perspective on the answer. And that was one of the questions that Bob asked about lessons learned from, what we have been able to do thus far. it has been really illuminating to see, and I think most of the participants in these various project teams would agree with this, that it's been really illuminating to see what the other teams are working on and really see how the work streams relate to each other. Up to this point, or up to pre-safe, most of your time on a project was spent supporting that particular project, and you may not have had full visibility to see what else was going on around you, and may not have had a full perspective on what the big picture might look like. And in the recent inspect and adapt activity that sort of concluded the first program increment, 3-month period of time, it was really good, I think, for everyone to see what the other teams were, what the other teams had worked on during that period of time, and to see how that work ties into the whole. Thanks.
Thank you, Sarah. Could you explain the product backlog a little further?
I can do that. Yeah, so I think the program backlog is what we refer to there, and the program backlog, think of that as the work we have yet to do. It's a list of to be developed features or enhancements to existing features, etc. It's everything that we want to do, and it's like everything that we want to do within a program increment or multiple program increments in one place. It's all the work streams features. And it's used by the product managers in particularly to help prioritize all of the features across all of the work streams. So imagine, if you will, there's a product, a feature for one product, say product A, and there's another feature for product B, and they both need the same resources to get them done. If we prioritize all the features across all of the products, then we can say that, which one is more important. If we have to get to that level, that program board, that program backlog helps us prioritize all the features in one place, so that we can kind of make those determinations of, well, this feature is so important that we have to get this one done. That other one, if we can't get it done because we have the same resources working on both, then so be it. And that's the value of the product, the program backlog. And we use it as we approach that PI planning event, and we use it in the PI planning event to kind of like determine what are we actually going to work on.
Thank you, Bob. Next question. What software do you use to manage your Agile methodology?
This is Mike Nybeck. I'll go ahead and take that one. We use a suite of tools that are called Jira from a company called Atlassian to manage all of our tracking and management of the stories and epics and enablement safe capabilities. So all of our work is managed in there. And that, since we have that single tool set, we have complete visibility all the way down to what an individual engineer is working on and how that relates all the way up the stack into which epic it's part of and what part of the PI planning it exists in. So we get both the big picture of the forest as well as pictures of the individual trees.
All right, thank you, Mike. Next question. Is there a threshold in terms of project dollar value or complexity that determines when a project manager should consider implementing SAFe versus simply using a traditional Agile approach?
So I think each organization does the assessment of whether something should be Agile or not in a different way. So I'll start with that caveat. But here at the library or in the copyright office, we look at the projects and we use an evaluation tool. It's called an Agile Suitability Scorecard. And we look at each one of the many factors. It's very detailed. It's actually something that's derived from the work of PMP or PMI, where they have tackled key components of an Agile project, and they have these factors, and they kind of weight whether a project is more Agile or more waterfall based on these multiple factors. And we built a suitability scorecard at the library based off of the information we learned from that. And we use that to kind of assess each project as it's coming through our PMO to decide whether it should be Agile or not. And that's how we determine it. There's not a complexity or a dollar mark per se, but it has more aspects to it, like the types of requirements and the interaction, the engagement of the customer, and those types of factors.
Okay, thank you very much, Bob. That will conclude today's webinar. When you sign out of the session, we encourage you to take part in a brief survey regarding your experience. We use this to improve our webinar program, so your feedback is greatly appreciated. Thank you for your participation today, and please join us for the next webinar.